Come on, man. Builds character.
All right, everybody all set? Morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the monthly snapshot of our citywide crime reduction efforts. In a moment, of course, you'll hear from Mayor de Blasio and then our Crime Control Strategies Chief, Lori Pollack, to go over the January crime numbers. And it's no coincidence that we're meeting here today at the Van Dyke Community Center in the confines of the 73rd Precinct. I'd like to thank Sandra Johnson. She's the Senior Director for Hospitality, and also Dean Castro from Medgar Evers College. Brownsville pushed crime down by more than 3% in January this year compared to January 2018. Like the rest of New York City, this neighborhood has seen overall reductions in violence and disorder over the past 5, 10, 25 years. But this community is also one that I highlighted recently when I spoke of our 6 commands that at the end of 2018 had violent crime rates more than twice as high as the rest of the city. You'll recall that the other precincts are the 7-5, also in Brooklyn, the 4-0, the 4-1, the 4-2 in the Bronx, and the 2-5 in East Harlem. The violent crime rate is the combination of murders, rapes, robberies, and felony assaults adjusted for population in each precinct. So while these 6 precincts don't necessarily have the highest gross numbers for individual crimes, they do have the highest rates relative to their populations. And when I speak about these 6, I'm talking about our moral obligation to face this challenge head-on until every street in every New York City neighborhood is as safe as our safest streets already are today. So tomorrow here in the Van Dyke Community Center, we are holding the first of a series of meetings I'll hold in each of these 6 precincts. A wide range of community representatives are invited, a true cross-section of Brownsville. We're going to talk about the problems, the concerns, and the challenges that are unique to this neighborhood. This is the next iteration of neighborhood policing. Listening and taking action together is how we build trust and strengthen relationships. And that's how the NYPD can secure the all-important buy-in from the people we serve and how we can all share the responsibility for our public safety. These meetings will empower us to find new solutions to tough problems, and we're going to do that together. And we'll know these efforts are successful when participation from all sectors of government and community is commonplace, when crime and disorder continues to fall, and when quality of life on every block in every neighborhood is improved and, most importantly, sustained. So these first 6 precincts are a departure point for us beginning here tomorrow, and we're only starting here. We won't be stopping here. Every neighborhood deserves to enjoy the same level of safety and well-being as the rest of the city. That's our pledge, to ensure that all neighborhoods are safe, regardless of where the people we serve call home. Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much, Commissioner. And Commissioner, I want to commend you and the men and women at NYPD for some very important progress that you've made in the month of January 2019, and for all the progress you've made over the last years. What I'm hearing from you is something I want to commend, which is that the NYPD is going on the offensive in areas that still need more help. There is no resting on laurels here, even though there's been extraordinary reductions in crime across the city. There are neighborhoods that need more focus, need more help, and they will get that focus, they will get that help. We will not rest until we bring down crime even further. So, you know, there could be the idea that when you get to the point of being the safest big city in America, you know, say that you've touched bottom, you've gone as far as you can go. That is not our approach. We are going to go a lot farther, and it will be in large measure because we drill down on the areas that need help the most. Brownsville is a community that was historically neglected by government, that did not get its fair share. We've been trying to right that wrong on many fronts in terms of affordable housing, in terms of education, but we're also doing it when it comes to policing, doubling down our commitment to making this a safer community. So, Commissioner, thank you for your commitment to this part of our city and to the other precincts that you will be focusing on as well. I think this is a very important and very helpful initiative. I want to thank, of course, First Deputy Commissioner Tucker, Chief of Department Monahan, all the leadership at the NYPD. And I very much want to thank our host here today, the Van Dyke Cornerstone Community Center. This is a really important piece of the equation as well, both for making this a better community overall, for ensuring that our young people are nurtured and supported and can reach their potential. But we also know, we've known it for decades. In fact, police leaders have been saying this for decades in this city, in this country, that when you give young people constructive options, it contributes greatly
to public safety. So thank you to everyone who is part of Van Dyke for the great work that you do. NYPD has proven, I think beyond a shadow of doubt, that the way forward is neighborhood policing. The way forward is to ensure that people in every community feel they are being treated fairly, that the way to greater public safety is through fairness. Safety and fairness walk hand in hand. This has been proven, I think, once and for all over this last half decade in New York City, and we're going to deepen that strategy with this new initiative. Precision policing has worked, and this is going to be an example of taking that even further. Neighborhood policing has clearly worked, and again, this will enhance the neighborhood policing approach. I want to note that the evidence is clear. The numbers get more and more striking with every passing month. We got rid of a broken and unconstitutional approach to stop and frisk. It's down 94% since 2013, and we've seen consistent reductions in crime. We've been using much less arrest, and this is something that Commissioner Bratton said when I was first working with him in this job, that arrest is one tool. It's not a goal unto itself. Arrests are now down nearly 40% since 2013, with crime going down consistently, approximately 150,000 fewer arrests in 2018 than in 2013. And it's had a very positive impact using a new strategy that has helped to bring police and community closer together. Chief Pollock will go into the details in just a second about January, but the most important thing to know is overall crime down 7.4% this January 2019 versus January just a year ago. So continued progress by the NYPD, working with our neighborhood partners. And the approach, the focus on data, the focus on precision policing, CompStat, all of these strong realities, all the things that have worked for years and years, focus us on these 6 precincts that the Commissioner spoke about. 6 out of the 77 in the city, 6 where we see violent crime still at levels that are unacceptable and that we must address once and for all. The 7-3 is one example of that, and we are confident that we can make a big impact here. So I want to thank the Commissioner, thank all the leadership of the NYPD for this focus on these 6 precincts. The Commissioner and I will be visiting these precincts throughout the year to see the progress and to make sure everyone is focused on achieving these goals. And we're going to ensure that this is part of a strategy to make the safest big city in America even safer. I want to say one last point before I say a few words in Spanish. The folks who live in these precincts are hardworking New Yorkers. They're folks who every day make this city work. They need to know that their neighborhoods will be safe. They need to know their families will be safe. So to everyone who lives in the 25th, the 40th, the 41st, the 42nd, the 7-3, and the 7-5 precincts, to everyone in those communities, know the NYPD is doubling down, putting more focus, more resources into making you safe. I want to now say just a couple of quick words in Spanish. El Departamento de Policía continúa reduciendo el crimen, pero sabemos que hay más trabajo por hacer. Estamos evaluando 6 cuarteles porque queremos mejorar la seguridad en toda nuestra ciudad. Al reducir el crimen y mejorar la relación de la policía con nuestras comunidades, seguimos construyendo la ciudad grande más justa del país. With that, I turn to our Chief of Crime Control Strategies, Lori Pollock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, everyone. Overall, like the Mayor said, we have seen a 7.4% reduction in overall crime. That's a decrease of over 500 crimes and a record low for January. We have also seen a reduction of 7 shootings this month, making this a record low January with 52 shootings. The low is driven by a 40% reduction in shootings in the Bronx, 16 versus 26. We do show an increase in Brooklyn North, 14 versus 8, Manhattan North, 7 versus 5, and Queens North and Staten Island both are up 1. These shootings are 31% gang-related, which is usually between 30 and 40%. We have set new milestones with record low robberies of any January, down almost 20%, and a record low of 888 burglaries. Only the 3rd time in CompStat history that we have come in below 900 burglaries. It isn't all good news, however. January saw an increase in murder by 5, 27 versus 22. The Bronx did see a decrease in murders, 5 versus 8. 5 of our patrol boroughs saw increases. Notably, a third of this month's murders were in Brooklyn North, 9 versus 3. Manhattan North, 4 versus 0. Brooklyn South, 3 versus 1, with the hammer attack during which 3 people tragically died. Housing murders are up 8 versus 5, and 22% or 6 of the murders were gang-related. Domestic murders were down 4 versus 7, with no domestic shooting murders, and we continue to remove guns from households where there are reports of domestic violence. We have removed 6 guns so far this year. January saw a 27% increase in rapes, 115 compared to 118 last year. So 54% of those reports happened in January 2019. 40% of the 150 rapes are domestic violence related, and 50% of those have arrests. In your press release, there is a breakdown of the totals for rapes yearly back to 2014 and the timeframes from occurrence to report. Here, in the 7-3 precinct, there were 8 reported rapes this January versus 1 last January. 2 of the 8 have arrests. 1 was an attempted stranger rape for which there is an arrest. And as we have said in the past, we believe that rape is a very unreported crime, and I don't believe that 1 report last year was a realistic number. And the increase in reports this year is actually encouraging. As you have heard us discuss, there have been major improvements made to the Special Victims Division. New leadership with Deputy Chief Judy Harrison, and I would like to say right now that we are adding 35 more investigators to the 260 that we have presently. That's a 14% increase in investigators to handle the additional reporting of rapes. We have improved facilities and new training. In addition, I would like to highlight that starting this week, for the first time since the inception of CompStat, we are starting CompStat meetings solely dedicated to the Special Victims Division. These will be closed meetings where we'll have supervisors work through their cases and share best practices. Chief Harrison and I have done an assessment of the data we collect regarding these crimes, and there are areas of improvements. The improvements to special victims under Chief Shea is to bring special victims up to speed with the rest of the department's data analytics. The confidential nature of investigations oftentimes have impeded our ability to do more real-time analysis, and we are fixing that. I will continue the message to all survivors. Please come forward and give us a chance to investigate these crimes no matter when they occurred. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, questions on the crime stats, on the January crime stats? Marcia.
Commissioner, I wonder if you have,
Oh.
I wonder if you have any stats on hate crimes, where they are, and what steps you're taking to prevent the rise of hate crimes in New York City.
Sure. Dermot, do you have the hate crime numbers?
I'll get you the exact numbers in a moment, Marcia, but it's approximately through January, approximately, and it is a jump, statistically a large jump. Percentage-wise, it's about an increase of 30 numbers, but I'll give you the exact number shortly. And as we've seen before, the majority of them at this point in time, 1 month into the year, are anti-Semitic.
So, can you tell us what steps you're taking to try to prevent the rise of hate crimes?
Yeah, well, the analysis that Laurie just mentioned certainly holds true here also in hate crimes. What we're seeing is what we've seen before, a dramatic increase in the property crime-related hate crimes, particularly swastikas. We've made a number of arrests in the last couple weeks, one in the Upper West Side in the 2-0 precinct, swastikas that were spray-painted, and we've also made arrests in Brooklyn, similar type incidents. The outreach continues. Our hate crimes task force goes out to community meetings, trying to spread the word about what is a hate crime, what is not a hate crime, and certainly in large demand, but those meetings are very well received.
Is it also about teaching tolerance?
There's unquestionably a need to teach more tolerance, and we have been doing that in our public schools, and we're doing that in the way that this city respects all communities. I mean, one of the great things about New York City is that from the top down, we talk about respecting all New Yorkers of all backgrounds. NYPD practices that in so many ways. Our schools do, you name it. We're dealing with a negative situation, obviously, nationally, Marcia. There's no question. We're dealing with an atmosphere of hate that has been generated largely from Washington, D.C., and that's a headwind we're fighting against. But I have to say, I've always believed the best way to inhibit hate crimes is to show consequences. I think the NYPD has done that very powerfully in a number of cases. To be able to stop hate crimes, though, we need information. So this is another version of if you see something, say something. Anyone who witnesses a hate crime, anyone who has information about someone who committed a hate crime, we need it because we want that person brought to justice, and that sends a message to anybody else who's intolerant. Don't even think about it.
We're going to make sure that we, at our community council meetings and our NCO Public Safety Summit meetings, that this subject is brought up proactively and not wait for a question.
Marcia, just,
Hold on. Good?
Marcia, the latest 3 days into February now is plus 23. So it's 42 verse 19. 42 verse 19.
For the year.
For the year.
Year to date.
Correct. Yeah. And that's 28 verse 14 on the anti-Semitic. So as what we see year after year, that subsection really drives the hate crime numbers in New York City. No, I wouldn't pinpoint any one thing. I mean, we see the gamut. We see, again, if I was going to generalize what we see in New York City, it's swastikas, certainly, and we'll see them etched at times on trains, but that's by far not the majority. We'll see mailboxes. As I've said, we've seen a couple individuals really drive these numbers, which is frustrating. We've had one individual account for 10 to 15 separate incidents. So that is something just to be aware of. We also had the incident in Brooklyn South, the tragic incident with the hammer attack, which was 3. So that's where we are.
Juliet, I think you had a question?
Yes. Regarding the rapes and the new drive towards, helping special victims, what are you doing as far as trying to make more arrests in those cases?
Right now, for the overall number for January, we have a 40% arrests on those. For the month of January domestics, we have a 50% arrest rate, but these take time to investigate, so it's rolling. Certainly the 35 investigators are going to help in that pursuit.
Courtney.
The 6 precincts, and forgive me if you talked about this last month, but why are they so tricky to try to get crime down there? Is it all gang related? And how is this meeting tomorrow going to be different from the community meetings you have in the neighborhood all the time?
So can we stick to the January crime stats, and then when we get off topic, I'll answer your question? I want to see if anybody's got any more questions about the January crime numbers. All right, moving right on to you. There you go.
It was easy.
Works like magic. These six precincts they're not outliers, but if you look at the crime rate per 100,000, the shooting rate, homicide rate, the rape, robbery, and felony assaults, they're the top 6 highest precincts. And I think I know, as the NYPD and in the whole city as a whole, we have an obligation to make sure that the streets out here in the 7-3 are as safe as our safest streets in New York City. What we are looking to achieve tomorrow night with the community meeting, and it's going to be, the participants we're going to have people from the DOE, we're going to have people from the Business Improvement District, we're going to have tenant association leadings from NYCHA, from MOCJ, the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice. There'll be clergy there, there'll be elected officials there, there'll be people from Violence Interrupters. A lot of good work's been done out here, but I think there's a lot. If we're going to continue to push crime down, I think we all, not just the NYPD, we have to come up with a holistic strategy to do that. To stop that shooting from happening, to stop that robbery from happening. And how do we go about doing that? So this is, I think it's going to be a very productive meeting. I look forward to it, and it's not going to be, it's not going to be the last one in a 7-3. This is something that we have to make that sustainable, that we continue to push those numbers down. They had 14 homicides in 2018 and 47 shootings. I think it's the highest raw number of murders, and I think it's the highest raw number of shootings too. So that's something we have to pay particular attention to. Yep.
On the 7 train attack, I guess there are 2 questions. One, has there been an uptick in MS-13 activity in the city? And second, do you have any idea as to whether or not the man who suspected murderers in the country legally.
Dermot?
Yeah, I do not have any information regarding immigration status. It's not something we really collect, if you will. In terms of an uptick in MS-13, there's been a number of incidents, I'll say, going back the last 6 to 12 months. But in terms of an uptick, we do not see a lot of MS-13 traditionally activity in New York City. You have one incident like this, and this obviously is one too many. I can think back about a month ago, we had the terrible incident in the Rockaways where an individual was lured to a park and killed. That was then connected to another incident across the border into Nassau County. But by and large, we put a lot of emphasis and focus with our precision policing on gangs, the violence they drive in New York City, and when you rank the gangs that we see and we target, MS-13, obviously an incident like this will catch our attention, but I wouldn't put them at the top of the pecking order in what we see day in and day out.
Yep.
I wanted to ask about, excuse me, that NYPD's use of Operation Lucky Bag type situations where a bag containing valuables is left for somebody to find, and then when that person doesn't turn it over to a police officer, they're arrested. There are some people who have criticized this practice, including the judge who oversaw 2 arraignments where people arrested on it in the last week. But people are asking why, when the department is looking to minimize arrests, they're creating situations for people to get arrested.
Yeah, there's been a number of iterations of Lucky Bag over the years, and we use it in a way now to make sure that we target the very small percentage of the population that are involved in crime. I think it's an important tool to use, but it does have to be used in a way that we're making sure that we're having an impact on grand larcenies, and grand larcenies continue to be an issue for the city, not just the NYPD.
Mayor, does it give you any pause, considering your strong commitment to reducing arrests?
Well, I'm not sure I understand how you're framing it, so I don't see how you're connecting it to that. Please clarify.
Well, I mean, there would have been nothing for these people. What some of their defenders and even the judge says is there would have been nothing for them to steal if the NYPD hadn't purposefully left a bait package out for them to walk by, pick up, and walk away with.
Again, if it's part of a crime-fighting strategy, obviously we need to use a host of strategies to achieve our goals. There's a reason crime keeps going down in New York City, and that's what everyone wants to see. If there's some unintended consequence, we have to address it. I have not heard previously that this was a particular problem, but we'll certainly look at it. If there's an unintended consequence we need to address, we will.
Yeah. Rich?
So, Mr. Commissioner, in the vernacular, sometimes people talk about tough neighborhoods. Are you trying to make, in those 6 precincts, are you trying to make that phrase obsolete?
No, we're trying to make the streets here in the 7-3 as safe as the streets in other places in New York City. I lived in Brooklyn when I was a kid. Of course, there were different neighborhoods. There were tough neighborhoods, but doesn't mean they have to be unsafe neighborhoods.
Yeah. Wait a minute, I just want to play off that too. I appreciate Rich's question. I do think, Rich, and it parallels a bit of what we've said on the education side, where the vernacular, as you said, in New York City has been for generations, oh, that's a good school, that's a bad school, and we're trying to end that concept once and for all. I do think, to the commissioner's point, we're trying to ensure that people who live in Brownsville, for example, will one day soon feel just as safe as folks who feel now in a lot of other neighborhoods. I mean, for all of us who have been in this city a long time, there are a lot of neighborhoods that not so long ago you would have said was a tough neighborhood that now people feel are very, very safe. And we want to make sure these 6 precincts feel that reality as well.
Juliet.
So what is the common denominator in these 6 precincts, and what are you asking the community leaders to?
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's a common denominator. Every neighborhood in New York City is different. That's why we're holding these strategy meetings, to try to get to the root cause and see what we can do to prevent the violence from happening in the first place.
And then what do you want community leaders to do? You're meeting with, business people and clergy, and what are you asking?
I want everybody to have input into this. This is not just a police issue. It's 47 shootings in 2 square miles in 12 months is something we all need to be concerned about. So,
and I'm sorry, one more thing. Input and buy-in, Juliet, I think it's one of the things that neighborhood policing is doing very effectively, and I want to credit the commissioner who was, created the original design for this, that it's saying to people in the neighborhood, NYPD can do a lot, but it can't do everything alone. It needs real neighborhood involvement and neighborhood buy-in. And I think one of the ways that people feel they are part of the solution is if you invite them to the table. And these meetings have been very impressive. A lot of these neighborhood policing meetings have had huge attendance, and people want to be invited in. So I think this is trying to take it the next step and say, let's break the back of this problem, but everyone has to be a part of it.
Zolan?
Special Victims Division, what exactly does bringing it up to speed with data analytics mean? Just because I know previously when you were asked about the measure of success for these investigations, it seemed like it wasn't always limited to the result being an arrest. You know, it might be going through the process and, you know, that results in a victim having closure. So I guess what does bringing it up to speed with data analytics mean? And are you worried at all that that might result in a system where the only positive result or measure of success is an arrest? And will that then, you know, pressure victims to stay in an investigation when they don't want to?
No, it's bringing it up to speed with data analytics it's an important component of what we do. That's how we manage to get to where we are with violence, with homicides and shootings, with what Lori and Terry and Dermot do every Thursday morning at CompStat. So just to make sure we have an increase, a steady increase in the number of reported rapes, we just have to make sure that we have the number of properly trained personnel to address that increase, and you know, just quite frankly, to be able to bring justice to the survivors of sexual assault, which might not necessarily be an arrest, but that's an individual experience for each survivor.
How many of the additional 35 investigators are white shields?
Dermot?
At this point, probably the majority of them will be. They'll go through the same training. They'll undergo the criminal investigators course and then receive additional training, unique and set out upon by just special victims to bring them up to speed. That's a significant jump in personnel. If you look back just, it's a 14% increase where it is now, but if you go back just a year prior to that, you're seeing very significant jumps in personnel, which is, I think, you know, a great example of our commitment to sexual assault survivors.
Women's advocates and members of the Special Victims Division have criticized the addition of white shields as opposed to more experienced investigators. And I think you yourself have said these investigations require a lot of experience. Are you comfortable just, you know, adding white shields going forward?
Yeah, adding white shields not prepared would be a separate issue. I'm very comfortable with the training that they are receiving, the mentorship that they receive once they get into special victims. So yes, the short answer is yes, I am comfortable. This is not a unilateral decision where just white shields are selected. It's an application process, very selective who gets picked, and also it is open up for detectives. But with this particular 35, the majority will be white shields.
Courtney?
Can we get an update on the incident at the construction site where 2 people were shot? Do you have an update?
Yeah, well, where we are now with that investigation, yesterday in Coney Island, we had 2 individuals shot. The female that was shot, unfortunately, it was a fatal gunshot wound to the chest. We had a second individual that received non-life-threatening injuries. What we know, a little more than yesterday, it is still fairly early, is that there was a construction site where a group of individuals were at that location trying to get employment. We believe that the 2 individuals that were shot were together and that they were part of a larger group that was seeking employment. We know that there was a dispute where shots were fired and subsequently a car fled the scene. We're working on identifying that car as we speak. We have some strong leads. Whether that dispute was separate and apart from the people that were applying for a job, that's the details that we still need a little more time to iron out.
Any other questions? I'm sorry, you didn't see you back there.
Way back there.
On the Special Victims Division numbers, is there any plan, how many of those additions will specifically be for the adult sex crime squads? Is there a plan for that yet?
Yes, there absolutely is. So right now, and this is tentative and preliminary and numbers change, I'll just give you some background. Of the 35, 16 are scheduled to go to the child side of the house, with 15 going to the adult side. There's another 4 that are going to transit specific. So transit could be adult too, just to have that differentiated. Let me just give you one set of numbers here. In 2017, when the IG report came out, it was quoted that we had 74 catching detectives on the adult side. That was 2 years ago, really less than 2 years ago, 74. We boosted that number up to 120 by last year. With this increase, we have had some attrition. Roughly the 120 became 116 through people retiring. With this, we're going to go up to 129 on the catching. So that's an increase in less than 2 years, from 74 detectives to 129. And if my math is correct, a 74% increase just on the adult side. So again, a lot of good things happening in special victims. We feel very confident in Deputy Chief Judy Harrison's leadership. Again, one rape occurring in New York City is too much, but as Chief Pollack said, and the advocates have said, and we continue to meet with them on an ongoing basis, we need the reports, we need the rapes to be reported, because again, we think that it is occurring, not just here in New York City, but nationally. It remains one of the most underreported crimes.
And on the staffing numbers,
Yeah.
you're required by law, obviously, to report this to City Council. Have you done that yet? And if not, why not?
Well, this is going to take some time. These people are being vetted, but we will abide by all requirements.
And last question, just in light of the lawsuit filed last month, is there a concern that gender bias has hindered the division from taking reports of rape seriously in the past, and is there any steps in place to?
Yeah, I think I listened to that press conference. I was not here. I think Judy Harrison knocked that question out of the park, quite frankly, when she pushed back very strongly on that. When you look at the executive leadership that's made up mostly of females in special victims, I would disagree strongly against that.
Yep.
I have an off-topic question for the mayor.
Yeah, can we just see if there's any other police-related questions first?
Police-related questions?
Yeah.
I don't know if you're sure about that.
Is this like Jeopardy? Sure, I'll take police for
Courtney.
100.
That's not a matter of trust. Courtney.
Well, I would like to get your thoughts and the mayor's thoughts on the events at MDC over the past week. It's your job to ensure that workers are safe. When you see people who have been accused of crimes or are serving sentences go through those kinds of conditions, what do you think?
Of course, it was a situation that we monitored very closely. The prison is run by the Federal Bureau of Prisons. We do not have jurisdiction there, but we did have police officers from Brooklyn South assigned to assist, especially when the demonstrations started to grow outside. So it's something that we carefully monitored and we needed to pay attention to.
Yeah, Courtney, it's an appalling situation, and it suggests a federal government that's slowly falling apart. This is something we never would have tolerated in our jails. You know, we would have immediately ensured that the conditions were addressed, but the federal government didn't seem to care. The response, I could give you a lot of examples, like the government shutdown and the lack of response to the Puerto Rico hurricane. I could go on and on. There just doesn't seem to be any accountability with this administration. And this is about basic human rights. It's about rights that Americans value greatly. We're talking about a facility right by New York Harbor. If you just dwell on history for a moment, when we were fighting our British oppressors, they kept hundreds and hundreds of American prisoners on prison ships and let them rot. And one of the things that was a founding principle of this republic was that we respected people's rights even if they were in the middle of the judicial process or even if they were imprisoned. Because, we as a nation saw how dangerous it is when those rights are not recognized, when that humanity is not recognized. And so it was appalling. And even when the issue was identified by advocates and the media, there was no real action. And we had to, when the city of New York has to come to the aid of the federal government because they can't get blankets to a prison that needs them, and they can't, get the lights back on. I mean, that's ridiculous. They're the federal government. They have all the resources in the world. So it was very, very troubling. The one thing I believe will happen and needs to happen is a full investigation. There have to be people held responsible for what happened.
Yep.
When you provided me, and I just need to go back and I got a very smart response from a very smart editor. You said traditionally MS-13 has not played a significant role in here in the city. Has that shifted at all in the last few months? Just to clarify.
Yeah, what I'm talking about there is when you look at the gang and the crew violence in New York City, and those of us at the podium here have studied it and lived it for many years throughout New York City. There are a number of gangs that are involved in more incidents of violence than MS-13. I think I was pretty clear yesterday, and as I was last summer with the junior incident with the Trinitarios. Any incident like this, whether it's 1 or 10, is one too many. And we will crush any gang that does not get it, that violence will not be tolerated in New York City, whether it's in a bodega in the Bronx or on a 7 train in Queens.
Yep, in the back.
Talking about the gangs, if the MS-13 is not your focus right now, which are the gangs that you are targeting right now?
I did not say that MS-13 is not our focus right now. In fact, as I said yesterday, the individual that was arrested for this homicide and has been charged with murder in the 2nd degree was the focus of the NYPD. That specific individual, this is precision policing, last year when he was arrested for conspiracy. So MS-13 is we have tremendous resources, thank you, Mr. Mayor, in the NYPD, and we can balance a lot of balls simultaneously. Any gang that raises its head in New York City will be dealt with.
And we're not naming any specific gangs to give them any additional credibility. Yep.
Just to clarify on the additional personnel and special victims, is that in addition to what was announced around the time that Chief Harrison took over? Or is that
Yeah, this is brand new, an additional 35 planned, and it's going to give us opportunities. The one thing that was not mentioned, very excited, because it's going to give us an opportunity to really take a second hard look at drug-facilitated crimes in New York City. And we plan to have an announcement, hopefully in the next couple months, to do more in that regarding outreach, regarding working with our partners, with the advocates, the medical examiner's office, the district attorneys, to make sure that we're doing everything we can to target anyone that would prey on women with drug-facilitated crimes.
Yep.
Chief Cheyenne, you can just give any, if there is an update on the 115. I know you're looking for 2 more suspects, just where the investigation stands on that.
Yeah, we put out 2 additional photos of individuals that were at the scene. We're looking for any information for them to come in, or if anyone knows them or their whereabouts to get the word out that we are looking to speak to them regarding that incident.
I've always held him responsible.
No additional updates at this time.
Okay, so let's let some of our colleagues have to get moving. Let's take a quick break, and we will go to off topic.